Valve's new hero shooter slash MOBA hybrid, known as Deadlock, has burst onto the scene with an exclusive alpha test to an unprecedented level of early success. I've been lucky enough to get my hands on it, and I'm enjoying it a whole lot. And part of why I've gotten into it so easily is that Deadlock's initial cast of playable characters feel familiar. So for fun, I decided to see if I could take an adjacent game with a massive character pool, League of Legends, and match those guys up with similar characters from Deadlock's roster. And if you're coming over from League like I am, maybe this will help you find a Deadlock counterpart for your main that feels like home. If you like this idea, do me a favor and hit the like button, it helps the channel grow, and you can let me know what you think of my comparisons down in the comments. Some of Deadlock's heroes are substantially closer in vibe to characters from other games, but I tried to get as close as I could with League champs anyway. Let's get into it. One thing to note right off the bat, Deadlock has a fantasy-imbued mafia prohibition theme, meaning that unlike League, everyone has some sort of firearm, even the close-range folks. For example, our first hero, a brawler named Abrams, uses a sawed-off shotgun. Visually, Abrams is giving a combination of League's Dr. Mundo, Big Purple Guy, and Galio, a gargoyle. And as it so happens, Abrams' moveset matches up with the two of them as well. Abrams has a sustain and healing ability like Mundo, which allows him to get in your face and stay there, and an ultimate move that is practically copy-pasted from Galio's ult, with the key difference being that Abrams gets to choose where he lands after jumping into the air, while for Galio, you choose your destination before launch. But then Abrams also has a shoulder check charge ability that brings just a hint of Scion ult to the mix. I like Abrams being first because I don't think any of these comparisons are a stretch at all. The same thing applies to Bebop, who is Blitzcrank, and not just because he's a robot that yanks people close to him, but also because he can follow that yank ability up with an uppercut. One main difference is that Bebop's sends them flying a distance away. Bebop's other moves are sticky time bombs, which you can attach to allies or enemies, like Zillion, and Bebop's ultimate is just Vel'Koz's giant purple laser beam, meaning that Bebop is able to back his utility up with some serious damage. Our next hero, Dynamo, is where we start to get a little bit more abstract with it. Dynamo fills something of a support role, with abilities like this big circle that heals him and nearby allies. And I was going to compare this to someone like Sona or Seraphine, who do heal in big circles. However, while using his ability, Dynamo is slowed and unable to attack, so really it feels closer to Janna's ult, which has to be channeled. Then with this ability, he shoots out a wave that knocks enemies into the air, then holds them there, which is reminiscent of Janna's tornadoes, but is actually closer to Nami's wave ultimate or her bubble prison. Then he has this shimmery teleport ability, which can safely relocate Dynamo and his allies to a nearby location, and this feels like it sits somewhere between Ryze's teleport ult and Bard's wall-hopping portal. Dynamo's ultimate ability is called Singularity, where he creates a, singularity that pulls nearby enemies towards it. Wait a minute. I mean, you can't really steal astrophysics, but they're definitely pulled from the same thing. Anyway, onto Grey Talon, dude with a bow. He's got a long-range penetrating charge shot, just like well-known guy with bow Varus. The ability to launch himself into the air and rain a flurry of shots from above, which is similar to Xayah's ult, but less powerful and more versatile. He has a trap that takes a moment to arm, then stuns the first enemy to enter its radius, and Jin's traps work in almost the exact same way, and Grey Talon's ultimate lets you take control of an exploding owl, which is kind of like if Ashe's scouting ability could kill stuff. Boom. This is Haze. She's more of an assassin. She's got 2 guns, very cool, and a knife, because her first move is a skill shot throwing dagger that puts the target to sleep for a few seconds or until they take damage. And if you think about it, that's really just a pointier version of Zoe's Trouble Bubble. Haze's stealth ability, Smoke Bomb, feels slightly misleading since it features neither smoke nor a bomb of any kind. Instead, it's a straightforward sneaky move speed buff just like the one on Pyke. Haze's third ability is a passive that makes enemies take increased damage the more she hits them, and that's generic enough that there are plenty of League champs this is similar to, but we're just gonna go with Kai'Sa's passive. And fortunately, we get to end strong because Haze's ultimate is a big AoE flurry of bullets, which looks and works a whole lot like the equivalent ability on Samira. Keeping the clear parallels going, the next hero is basically Brand, but he's Infernus. He's the fire guy. Do you get it? Instead of a weapon, he just makes a gun with his hand, which I love. And like Brand, Infernus's kit is about lighting people on fire, debuffing them, and dealing damage over time. But where Brand can sometimes have issues with mobility, Infernus has got a dash ability which leaves a trail of scorched earth in his wake, essentially Corki's Valkyrie strafing run. Infernus' ultimate ability is a big AoE explosion that stuns people, and that's just like a fiery version of Nico's ult. Infernus also wears a hat, which Brand is not able to do for obvious reasons. And now we come to Ivy, who is a gargoyle, and I already compared Abrams to League's gargoyle champ earlier. However, I don't need to double dip just yet because Ivy's lineup of abilities is very different to Galio. First off, Ivy can summon a big circle of vines that damage and slow anyone caught in them, so Zyra's ultimate. Her second ability lets her connect to allies and share healing with them, which is a total Taric move. Then she has the power to turn into an invincible stone gargoyle and smash into the ground, healing over time and stunning nearby enemies. But even that is less like Galio than it is Lyssandra's ability, where she freezes herself in a damaging circle and heals up. And finally, we have Ivy's ultimate, which is actually pretty unique. Basically, she launches into the air and then can either drop a bomb from above, or she can choose to grab a nearby ally and drop them off somewhere instead. And the comparison I'm going with here is Tahm Kench. Not that he can fly, I wish, but his ultimate allows him to either eat an ally and carry them to safety, or eat an enemy to deal damage, and I think that type of versatility is what's at the core of Ivy's ability. Now we get to talk about Kelvin, the cold guy. Kelvin has an ice grenade with an AoE slow, like a mix of Anivia's Q and her ult. His mobility option is an ice path that he controls the height of, and gets a speed boost while running on, which is just Frozone from The Incredibles, but also reminds me of Talia. And Talia is an earthbender in the lore, but she does have an alternate ice skin. Next up is a Freezy Ice Ray, which scales in freeziness the longer it hits, and this one really does just feel like Mei from Overwatch, but the closest League equivalent would probably be Nunu's Snowball Flurry attack, and Kelvin's ultimate forms an impenetrable ice arena around him and anyone nearby, giving increased healing to him and his allies. The times I was able to use this ability to isolate someone, it felt kind of like Mordekaiser's ult, but its impact on the average team fight is probably closer to someone like Jarvan 4. Next up, Lady Geist is a vampire who trades her own health to deal damage, but also regains health by dealing damage. Vladimir from League of Legends is a vampire who trades his own health to deal damage, but also regains health by... you get it. The one major difference in Lady Geist's kit is her ultimate, which lets her trade health totals with an enemy of her choice. This offers tons of creative opportunities to strategically damage yourself to set up a finisher, but also it's all just some variation of trade your health to deal damage or deal damage to regain your health. And one of the more popular alternate Vlad skins even has the same sickly green color scheme. They are similar, I like them both. I rest my case. Lash has a big fist, and an ability which uses that fist to punch out a directional shockwave, just like Vi from the hit Netflix series Arcane. But the core of his moveset actually comes from his magical whips. He can use them to steal health from enemies, which looks a whole lot like Fiddlesticks' Bountiful Harvest, or launch himself haphazardly in their general direction, which is less of a grapple and more of a repositioning tool, like Akshan's Heroic Swing. And for his ultimate, you can select 2 enemies to snag with his whips and slam into the ground, and this feels distinctly similar to Zac, the GOO Guy's 2-person grapple ability. There's actually a Deadlock GOO Guy later on in this lineup, but it seems like Lash is a little gooey as well. We've got McGinnis, who is an engineer. She can place mechanical turrets to help with area control in lane, exactly like Heimerdinger from the hit Netflix series Arcane. She can toss out a healing grenade, which creates a regeneration field for nearby allies, like a less mobile version of Melio's Cozy Campfire. And she can control the battlefield to zone or trap enemies by placing what is referred to as a spectral wall, but looks a lot like an ice wall, a version of which you can find on the ice bird Anivia. Lastly, McGinnis has her own rapid-fire version of Xerath's artillery ultimate, bombarding locations of her choice with rockets at a distance. Mo and Krill are mafia moles, a little one riding on the back of a big one, and these guys really toe the line between Nunu the Yeti Rider and Rek'Sai the Subterranean Hunter. Nunu can eat enemies for a quick health boost, Mo and Krill can siphon health from enemies in their immediate vicinity. Rek'Sai can move while burrowed underground, then burst from the earth for a special attack. Mo and Krill can do the exact same thing. But thanks to their big mole hands and devious nature, Mo and Krill can also throw dirt in their opponent's eyes, leaving them temporarily blind and unable to use their weapon, the same as Teemo's blinding dart. And their ultimate locks a target enemy in place while Mo and Krill absolutely wail on them, just like Warwick from the upcoming hit Netflix series Arcane Season 2. Next up is Paradox, a robot with a head that looks like both an hourglass and a lava lamp at the same time, and shocker, they do time stuff. Their first ability is a bomb that repeatedly pulses in an area, and while the theming feels very much like Zillion, the repeated pulses and the way they lock down a zone actually feels closer to Gangplank's Cannon Barrage. Paradox can place a time warp shield wall at any angle, which will stop incoming enemy fire, and that is very much like the shield of everyone's favorite defensive daddy, Braum. bomb. Going on the attack, Paradox can charge a long-range energy blast, which will also briefly freeze the target in time, which feels like if Xerath's Q also had a built-in stun. And Paradox's ultimate is a fun one. They fire a projectile at an enemy, and if it hits, Paradox will swap places with them. And the ability this one is most like is no longer in League of Legends, but before his rework, this was actually Urgot's ultimate too. It was considered to be pretty terrible outside of a few niche cases, but as implemented in Deadlock, I think it has a lot more utility. Pocket is an emo spy with a magic wardrobe. His first ability is a straightforward barrage of spectral projectiles, which looks and feels like a combination of Kai'Sa's missile abilities. When he's in danger, Pocket can hop into his deceptively roomy suitcase for momentary invincibility, then pop out and deal damage, like Kane's ult, but with luggage instead of a living being. He can get in and out of trouble by launching his magical jacket in a straight line and teleporting to it anywhere along the route, just like Lysandra with her Ice Claw. And his ultimate is a burst of poison around him, like if Twitch's Venom Cask was a big fart instead of a projectile, with the key difference being that Pocket's poison can't deal lethal damage, so you have to finish enemies off through other means. Seven is the 15th character in the roster, which kind of feels like a missed opportunity. His first ability is a big orange lightning ball that floats forward at an irregular speed, a lot like Smolder the Baby Dragon's fiery sneeze bubble. Next, he has a static charge that will stun enemies in its radius after a brief period, and instead of saying Zillion's bombs a second time, I think it's actually more similar to Senna's W. He can imbue his weapon with a charge that will bounce between enemies, and Zeri's ultimate does the same thing, and Seven's ultimate is a deadly AoE lightning field right out of the playbook of League's very own Ninja Lightning hamster Kennen. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. This next guy, Shiv, has great hair, and his hair has nothing to do with his power, but I think it adds a lot on the vibe side. He has a resource called Rage, which he fills by fighting. As the name suggests, Shiv has throwing knives which damage and slow targets on hit, and if his Rage is full, they also apply a bleed and bounce between enemies, which is why I'd compare it to Cat's bouncing blade. Shiv has a dash attack, and if his Rage is full, a shadow clone will follow his path, dealing damage a second time, which I think is most comparable to the dash ability on Pyke. To make up for all the diving he does, Shiv has a damage mitigation ability which delays some of the damage he takes and allows him to recast the ability to heal for a percentage of the damage stored, and this feels like it exists at a unique intersection of the healing abilities of Tahm Kench, Mordekaiser, and Pyke again. And if all that normal charging wasn't deadly enough, Shiv's ult is an even more deadlier charge which will execute any enemy below a certain health threshold, like Pyke. Again. Vindicta is a witchy sniper lady, though most of the time her weapon is rapid fire. She has a trap ability which will tie an enemy target to a stake, restricting their movement, and League has a close combat version of this in Kled's bear trap on a rope. She can just straight up fly, that's cool, and Baby Dragon can fly. That counts. Vindicta also has a pet crow she can send in to damage an enemy and apply a bleed, and that takes me back in time to a pre-rework Fiddlesticks and his overpowered crow buddy. And for her ult, Vindicta can finally use her sniper rifle, and it works like a sniper rifle, greatly extending her range and dealing bonus damage to low health targets. And out of all the rifle-related skill shots in League, this feels most like the ult of everyone's favorite OCD serial killer Jhin. Side note, Vindicta is barefoot in a city, so no wonder she flies, otherwise she might step in the GOO GUY. That's right, we're finally here! Viscous is goo. His powers are goo. Light passes through his body, because it is goo. His first ability deploys a corrosive goo puddle which slows and damages enemies that step in it, like a more condensed version of Cassiopeia's W, or Twitch's Flask again, but I'm really trying not to repeat stuff. If Viscous or an ally are in danger, he can encase a target in a solid goo block, temporarily removing them from the situation and healing them, and the potential a move like this has to either salvage or completely ruin your teammate's fight makes it feel like a sticky version of Bard's ultimate. Viscous can also reposition targets with a giant fist which will pop out of a surface of his choosing and bop anything nearby. Casting this ability feels extremely similar to Talia's seismic shove, with the same sense of smug satisfaction when you knock someone out of position. And finally, Viscous embraces his honorary cousin Zac with an ult that turns him into a goo ball, which can bounce around and disrupt the enemy team. And I mean, what else is a goo guy even supposed to do? Warden is an old-school police officer with some thematically relevant tools, like a pacifying alchemical flask, which debuffs enemies in the affected area. And this feels the most like Singed's mega adhesive in that it primarily serves as a setup to lock enemies down for Step 2, Binding Word, where Warden presumably spouts legal jargon with such ferocity that the target enemy will be locked in place and damaged if they are unable to leave the immediate area quickly enough, a lot like Morgana's ultimate, only litigious. And to further lock those kills down, Warden has a shield which also grants him movement speed, which is similar to Karma, but Warden can only use it on himself. and when justice simply must be served, Warden can channel his energy to go Super Saiyan, repeatedly blasting directly ahead of him and healing for the damage dealt. This feels a lot like Swain's ultimate, and just like Swain, if you use this at the right time and positioning, you can sometimes turn around fights that you have no business winning. Wraith is a lot like Twisted Fate. They even shop at the same clothing store. Wraith's first ability lets her build up charges of magic cards, which she can then fire at nearby enemies. And Twisted Fate's card abilities are slightly more complicated than that, but cards are cards. Wraith's second ability is a decently long-range teleport. Not as long as Twisted Fate, but a teleport is a teleport. Her third ability is simple but effective, boosting the fire rate of Wraith and nearby allies, like Tristana's Rapid Fire or Yumi's Zoomies. And Wraith's ult is a purple blast which holds an enemy up in the air, silencing their abilities, then drops them doing damage. And I decided the closest parallel on this one is a combination of Malzahar's ultimate and his silencing wall, neither of which lift the target into the air, but the silence and the purpleness sell it for me. Yamato has 2 samurai swords and has made it their entire personality. They have a chargeable strike which can be executed early for less damage, and you can see the exact same mechanic on Sion's Q ability. Second is an elegant grapple dash to an enemy target, and I think Yasuo and his sword would definitely approve of Yamato's form here, but the addition of the grapple makes me also want to give a nod to Camille and her sword legs. Crimson Slash is third in the lineup, a directional flurry of swords which debuff targets and heals Yamato for each enemy champion hit, and Camille and her sword legs have a parallel for this one too. Last but certainly not least, Yamato's ultimate is Shadow Transformation. For a brief time, Yamato becomes stronger, faster, deadlier, and impossible to kill, and I think the impossible to kill part is the thing to highlight, so the barbarian Tryndamere and his stupid undying rage passive have the honor of rounding out our list. Because that's everyone so far, but I don't want to get too far into speculation when there's development left to be done. Once again, you can help us out by liking the video or leaving a comment. It's the great cliche of YouTube outros, but it seriously does make a notable difference. 2024 is the year of trying new stuff here on the channel, and regardless of whether it's even any good or not, try new stuff I will. But until next time, I'm Jamie. Thanks for watching Standard Gaming.